See, it always says live immediately, but then the side is like loading. So I never know if it's actually like live at the start or not.
No, it probably is.
Now it's been live for 3 seconds. Alright, no viewers. Not that I expect people to click on it the second it starts.
It's waiting.
We'll just wait for Jess to do our sound check. Just sit here awkwardly in the meantime.
Mm-hmm. We're very good at that.
Now the question is that viewer Jess? Jess, if that's you, can you please comment and or let me know how the sound is? Awesome. Alright, we will just get right into it. I was going to explain that people can come back and watch it later, but that won't help anyone. Okay, so last month, we'll do introductions first. I need to figure out which side I'm here. Hey everybody, this is Zack at Yaz. I'm going to try to remember to look into the camera up there, but I'll probably spend the whole time watching myself on that screen.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah, I can usually do it for the regular videos I record, but I don't usually have a picture of me right here in front of me. So last month we talked about logos and other design stuff around that. This month we are going to be talking about user interface and user experience, which I learned from Kayla. I didn't even let you introduce yourself.
Hi, I'm Kayla. I am the one of the graphic designers at Yaz Tech. So that's me.
Look at the camera. It's hard. It's gonna be hard. Okay, great.
Okay, yeah.
Now, what was I saying?
What we were talking about last month and what we're talking about this month.
Yeah, so I found out this week that UI UX stands for user interface and user experience from Kayla. I thought they meant the same thing, the same way that people will shorten Christmas to be Xmas because sounds like cross, I think. Or is there another reason? I don't know.
I don't know. I've never known.
So I just thought the X was for interface, intersection. And I was like, why do they have two letters? It doesn't matter. So last time, we have collected together some questions that we will be going through and giving our answers and opinions. If you have any questions to ask us while we're going, feel free to comment them below and we will try to get to them as well. Do you want to start or should I start?
I can start.
All right.
So, first question is, what is UI UX and what is the difference between that and graphic design? So, as Zack just explained, UI UX, UI is user interface design and UX is user experience design. So UX, typically they focus on solving user problems, whereas UI is creating interfaces that are intuitive, aesthetically pleasing, and interactive for users. And then graphic design is a lot different in the way that focuses on more branding and visual elements and logos and colors and typography and stuff like that.
Yeah, and it's one of those situations where great graphic design has to include elements of UI and UX for a good customer experience, but we just wanted to kind of specify that they're not exactly the same thing. You can have graphic design that doesn't have UI UX, which if you see great looking websites or great looking software apps that just don't work very well or it's not obvious what you're supposed to be doing, those are examples of design without user interface, customer experience. I'll try to not call it every single thing every time. So the first question that I have is, how often do you need to reconsider UI and UX? So I guess just in general, we'll be talking about websites mostly today. This is, of course, a difficult question to answer. Really what it comes down to is whether your customer is able to get what they need out of your website. So if they are getting to your homepage and you just hit them with a bunch of information and they are just leaving, if your website has a high bounce rate, which for anybody that doesn't know what bounce rate is, it is the percent of people who get to your website and then leave without interacting with anything. So if you have a high bounce rate or you've heard from clients that it's difficult to find, you're not getting a lot of conversions, contact forms, phone calls, that sort of thing, it is probably time to reconsider your UI and UX, your customers. I'm going to call them all three things every time.
Yeah, The only way you kind of know if you should reconsider UI UX is if you're getting the same type of user problems from your audience. Then you should really look at changing it to make it more intuitive.
And it's definitely easier when you're talking like software that people are using. They will let you know every time what's wrong with it and what's difficult about them using it. It's a lot harder to track that sort of thing with a website, because if someone gets to your website and they're not having a good experience, they're just going to leave and go to a competitor. They're probably not going to reach out to you and be like, I was trying to find out your plumbing services and I didn't have an easy time finding it. So it's like, if you feel like your leads are dropping off, or that you just want to make an improvement, whether or not you realize that there is a problem, that is the right time to consider this.
So next question, how important is the first impression in UI UX? I would say this is pretty important. If you get to a website or software that is super cluttered, not intuitive at all, you're seeing like all information at once, there's no hierarchy in information, chances are you're going to probably get frustrated and find a new software or website to use. Yeah. So
we really only give a website, like I think you can read this all over the place, like a couple of seconds to prove itself. Like if you get there and you don't find exactly what you're looking for, or even if you get to a website and it's not obvious what it's about. Like I have to tell clients all the time when we're getting started, your above the fold, which is the section that loads first on the website, it has to let people know immediately who you are and what you do. There should be no guesswork. A lot of companies have the benefit of having like a name and a logo that makes it obvious. Like if your name is like local plumbers, you don't have to work as hard. But if your name is like, I want to come up with some random word, but every word I think of it like exists. We'll call it Connecticon, like Transformers. If your business, even Yaz is a great example. If your business's name is Yaz and somebody gets to your website and it's like, we help you find solutions. Like, solutions for what? Like, we have to let you know that we do web design because our name is not Web Designers Limited. Unlimited.
Yeah, and I know we were talking about mainly web design, but also for software, like with the first impression, I've seen lots of software like TurboTax and other ones that they'll give you a little bit of an onboarding when you get in there. So they'll give you like a step-by-step and show arrows of like what is used for what and how you get to like this destination, how you do this thing, and that can be like super helpful as well. So that's also good for a first impression if you need that.
Yeah, I think we were discussing some of these questions beforehand as well, and this made me think of I download a lot of like app games on my phone, and I've noticed that a lot of them do this sort of tutorial thing that she's talking about, where it tells you exactly what to do and in what order, which I do sometimes struggle with that because I'm the type of person that wants to get in there and be like, don't tell me what to do, I want to try it out. Even though I'm also the type of person that gets frustrated and will like leave if I can't figure it out myself. The other way that I've seen this done in app games, which I guess is not super relevant to websites necessarily, but I do want to mention it, is that it will literally stop you from being able to, like, you'll unlock different features of the game as you progress through it. So it's not necessarily saying, like, go here and then go here. Like, I only have one option, which, I guess now that I mentioned that, to tie it back in, Google does something a little bit differently that I think has been being adopted by quite a few sites, where when you go to log into like Gmail, you don't have your username or email and then password together anymore. You are only able to put in your first one, then it takes you to a whole other like step where you put in your second one. And that's really smart on their part, because if you're like a login form is not really going to be this kind of issue because it's only 2 spots, but we do have problems where we'll see like 100 things in a contact form and decide not to fill it out for that reason. So having places like Google make it so that you literally only have one thing that you can do at a time goes a long way.
Next question. What is a UI UX design kit and what do they do?
It was my turn. Just kidding, go ahead.
Oh, it was your turn. That's okay.
Look how many. We've got post-it notes lined up along the table where we're sitting.
I'm just too like antsy.
Yeah. I've got to get my questions to answer right.
So a UI UX design kit is basically a kit that contains all like components of your UI design. So it'll contain forms and typography and stuff like headings and like error messaging, like everything you can think of when it comes to UI design. And what do they do? So these are really useful. You can look online. There's like different kits, like Apple Design, Material Design, Microsoft, and then there's other kits that like designers have created that are free to use. So they make the UI really consistent, and they just help with like how it works. Like everything is like what's the right word for this?
Consistent, I think, was the right
consistent.
word.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's very similar to like a design
Style guide.
Yeah, now I don't remember what that is. In that, like, whenever you're going to add something new or build out a new feature or something, you have a place to refer back to that's like, okay, this is what these steps look like in this website, in this software, and this is what we need to make sure that people continue to do. Mm-hmm. Which I don't remember. This is the point earlier that I brought this up, but I'll bring it up now anyway. I've been putting a lot of thought lately into the idea of like, now I'm not going to remember what I called it, foundational knowledge. So when it comes to like learning in general, humans rely heavily on foundational knowledge. So if you remember back to when you were like learning how to play a video game, learning how to play a sport, or I guess everything I'm saying is play an instrument, you didn't just jump in and like get on the piano and look at like a really complex song and be like, oh yeah, I know how to do that. I mean, even with games, they don't drop you in at the end of the game. You have to like learn things and unlock things throughout the process. I'm probably going to need you to help me tie back where I was going with this.
Yeah. So.
Do you know where I was going with this?
You ramble a lot.
I do. It's bad. Yeah, okay. So foundational knowledge, the reason why I want to bring it up is in interface and design, once somebody understands how to use your website in a specific way or your software in a specific way, and you change it so the way you fill out a form is different here than it is here, this is like something that you've already taught them that they no longer have to think, but if you change it, they have to rethink. Mm-hmm. I have more stuff to ramble about that, but I'll come back to it later.
Mm-hmm. I'm pretty sure we use a design system called Ant Design for our Let's Camp software. So this is a good example. When I first started at YazTech, I hadn't done anything with the Let's Camp software, and I had to design an availability calendar for it. So I made sure to ask the developers what design system we use for it so that I could keep that consistency and create something that like fits with the overall design, so that users don't have to relearn something.
My turn.
Your turn.
Next question is, can you add UI UX practices to an existing website? So this one again is a bit of another complicated one. Yes, there's nothing stopping you from adding things to your website that's going to make it easier for people to navigate. But the problem that I come across a lot with people who have existing sites is it's not always just a matter of putting a button here. Like if you have a home page that has like 30 pieces of information slapping you in the face, adding another button is not going to make it a better user experience. Like sometimes you really do need to get rid of a lot of stuff or start from scratch in many cases.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, adding like existing principles of UI UX to your website, I think it depends on how complex your website is to begin with. Like you can start with like little pieces and just try figure out what the user's problems are, and then take those little pieces and just kind of do it step by step to like create a more intuitive interface. So it can definitely be done, but if your website is like way too cluttered, all your information is on there at once, you might need a little bit of help, or it could be beneficial to start from scratch.
Mm-hmm. What?
You get to go twice.
Yeah. Sharing. Next question. How do you know how someone is going to use your website or software? So I think it's easier in like software in general, but let's talk mostly about websites. The answer to this does depend on like if you have an existing website already. So like there's lots of tools out there like Google Analytics that will tell you how many people were on each of the pages, the flow that they went through, so if they went from your homepage to other pages. So those can be really good insights. If you are building like a brand new business, you're building your first website, it's definitely going to be harder, but in that case, one of two things, I guess. Either one would be to like look at your competition and try to figure out what they are trying to offer as an experience. Although, as I've found, a lot of like local company websites are not great. from our research when we were trying to look at competition of people. And the second is, I guess, at this like moment, worry a little bit less about. I lost my train of thought.
It happens.
We're talking about. What was the question? Sometimes, usually when I'm not doing live videos, I cut this part out. Oh yeah, worry less about how you're like worried people are going to use your like website, and figure out how you want them to.
Yeah.
So if your goal is to get people to phone you, or your goal is to get people to fill out a contact form, put all of your focus on when they land on the page that first time, what information do they need to get through to be well equipped enough to get in touch with you. So that, do they need to know who you are? Do they need to know what your services are? Do they need to know what your process is? Work through how you have like sold clients in the past. If people have called you and you can figure out kind of some of the questions, what they need to know, and you want to make sure that the journey gives it to them.
So I was going to add something to that question, but it fits more with this one. How do you collect user research? So it kind of ties into your last question. So with your website, if you're unsure of how people are using it, how to collect user research, one like the easiest way to do it, I would say, is find suitable people that would use your website or software, like your target audience. Like say you're a golf website and people need to sign up for an event, for instance. Find people that fit this persona and kind of sit them down and just put your website in front of them and have like a simple task for them and get them to go through it and just watch them and observe what they do. And usually like 3 people is a good number for this. And make sure that like when you do test somebody, get someone to sit down and do a user test with them, make sure that they know that you're testing the website and the software and not testing them. Because in my experience, like I've done user tests, like I've been a subject for people doing user tests, and it kind of gets a little bit like nerve-wracking because like I'm scared that I'm going to upset them with the way I use their website or software. Yeah. So just make sure they know that like you're testing the website, not them. And yeah, just observe, see what they do. And if people are like, if your users are creating the same, like doing the same like workflow, each one of them does the same workflow, then you can look at how you can revise it to make it more intuitive.
Yeah, if they're all making the same mistake, you want to make sure that you fix that mistake because it's obviously going to be had by a lot more people. Mm-hmm. You also want to make sure when you're doing things like user tests that you are not asking like friends or family, because the problem is that people who are close to you, they want to tell you what you want to hear. You know, they want to be supportive. So if you like ask your partner to look through your site and you're like, do you think this is user friendly? You know, they're going to go through and be like,
yeah,
I think so. But that doesn't mean it. You want to find people who are willing to be honest enough with you to like give you good constructive criticism, even though it's something that I don't think we really do much in our daily lives.
Yeah, we could do more of that. It's also important to remember that because people will, like when creating your website or software, even with me being a UX UI designer, like when I did work as a UX UI designer for about a year and a half, it's hard to remember that you are not the user. Like you can use your own judgment to create something, but in the end, you're not the user. So you need to find people that actually are and are going to use the software and ask them instead, because their voice, their opinion is the one that really matters.
Absolutely. There's also some other software that you can use to get an idea of this. One that we've used in the past is called like a heat map or heat mapping.
Hotjar.
Also Hotjar?
Yeah.
Well, Hotjar has a heat map, right?
Yeah.
Okay. I'll talk about heat maps specifically first.
Okay.
And I'll pass back to you for the other stuff, unless we'll see. Yeah, so heat map is basically going to show you a visual representation of where people are clicking on your website. There's lots of like free tools that you can use to track this. So you look at it and you'll see that like this button is red, which means lots of people click here. You know, this space is kind of blue or there's nothing on it, which means nobody clicks there. That will also show you kind of a bit of an obvious reality that the further down something is in your website, the less likely people are to click it. So you want to make sure that what you think is the main point, the main thing that you want them to be doing is where they are clicking the most.
Yeah. So the question was, how do you collect user research? So you just talked about heat mapping. We used a software back in my previous job that was called Hotjar, and it had heat mapping in it as well. And also you had the ability to, this is more for software, I don't think you can do it for websites, but there are like other softwares I think that you can incorporate into your website that you can allow your users to give feedback. Like they can press like it'll be like, how was your experience today? And then they can like put the happy face or the sad face, and then leave a comment, and that's been really helpful. And also like just like little surveys, you can send out mobile surveys or email, whatever, and get feedback that way as well.
I think I should want to do your next question because these two kind of go together.
Okay. So how do you know if you're doing UI UX right? I feel like we pretty much answered that.
Yeah, mostly.
But also, like, if your software website is super clunky and unintuitive, you're not doing it right. And if you're kind of like, if you don't have any idea of, we talked about this before, but having a hierarchy of which information is most important and making sure users see that right off the bat, yeah, that's a really important aspect of having a good UI UX.
Yeah, and you also want to make sure that you don't ever get like stuck in that, like, my user experience is perfect, so I'm going to keep it this way for 20 years. Because like the things that were important 5 years ago, 10 years ago for a website aren't necessarily important now. Like, of course, there are some things that that we do get really used to, like on websites, having the navigation at the top more often on like the right side of the screen, or having like the Hamburger Menu that came out when like sites started needing to be mobile friendly. If you don't know what the Hamburger Menu is, it's those three little lines at the top that when you click them you get like a drop down menu. So like when they made the change to mobile friendly sites, it just made sense for everyone to use like this same little icon of a hamburger menu because people had already attributed meaning to it. So as soon as you see it, you know what it does. You don't have to figure it out or have any guesswork to it. Which, do you have another point for that?
No, go ahead.
Okay. Which does bring me back to my foundational knowledge example. I'm writing a blog on this currently, and the example that I like to give is every time you go to like a hotel that has a shower that has like a different, what do you call it? Like your
knob?
Your knob, a different knob than you're used to. It seems like alien technology, and like it's not like they're actually complicated to use. It's just that you probably grew up having either the type of like sink and shower that had like two knobs, one for hot and one for cold, or one that like you move it to the left for hot or you move it to the right for cold. So now you have these ones, and actually this is what I have in my shower, and I'm used to it now, but only because I've used it so much. I would expect if I turned it left, I would get hot, but it only turns to the right. So I actually have to turn it like past cold to get to the hot. And so like, again, it's not something that's complicated at all, but because it's not using what I already know about these systems, I have to stop and think about it. Like even when you are at, I used to work at like a hardware store chain, I guess. And so we had like at our tails, we ended up having to have all of these annoying signs of what people can and can't do based on what people have messed up in the past. And then we would get like annoyed that somebody didn't read the sign. I'm sure with like the pandemic, there's a lot of signs that people are ignoring because it's just like, it's not part of the usual experience to have to stop and like make sure you understand everything that's in front of you. We ignore most of what's in front of us except for what we think we need to be focusing on.
There's a book that I read like a couple years ago. It's called Don't Make Me Think, and it's all about website design and getting user research. And I forget who it's by. I feel like his name is Steve, but I don't know his last name. Anyways, yeah, it was a really helpful book in creating like super intuitive websites. So give that a read if you want. And also, if you're unsure if you're doing UX UI right, you can always Google like UX UI best practices, which we're going to talk about in a bit. And Google will tell you everything, and you can see like blog posts and images and whatever. It'll help you out a lot.
Yeah, the beauty of the digital age is that most people have already done a lot of the work for you. It's just a matter of finding the information and internalizing it. You mentioning that book, Don't Make Me Think, also reminded me another example that I like to use. I watched a video, I can't remember who it was by, it was a couple of years ago. They talked about the like UI UX of doors. So if you are like most of us, you've probably been conditioned to know that a horizontal bar on a door means push, and a vertical bar means pull. But then you get up to those doors that has a vertical bar on both sides, and then what do people have to do?
Push. Pull. I don't know.
When we were talking about this earlier, you're like, oh, then they get the sign. Put you on the spot. Great. So yeah, you have to like, if you have to put a sign on something that says push or pull, it's already failed, because again, nobody's going to read the sign, because it's just not like, you're not getting up to everything you interact with throughout the day and being like, how does this work? Your body knows it better than you do.
Yeah.
And so in this video, they talked about like, how do you design the perfect door? And the answer was, on the push side, to have it flat, like just a flat panel. So you literally can't do anything except push it open. So you don't need a sign on that one, because no one's going to mistake it. On the other side, just make sure there's a vertical bar. Some people might still push, but you can never please everyone.
There's a rule about UI design that relates to that. It's like, I forget the exact words, but it's just creating software that relates to real life situations. And basically it's creating your software where people don't have to think about how to use it. They just use it.
Yep.
So.
Which leads us into some examples of best practices for desktop websites. Obviously, we're not going to know all of the best practices. We're just going to go through some of the most common ones that we deal with a lot. And so from my perspective, like, having the navigation at the top is really important. I think it was a bit of an older trend that some businesses have their navigation on like the left side, and it's not the end of the world. People can usually figure out how to use it. But again, if everybody clicks up in the top navigation on most websites and then yours is different, they have to stop and think about it. And more likely than not, they're not going to. Do you want to do it back and forth, or do you want me to just go through everything I can think of?
I'll go through everything you think of, and I'll add to it.
Yeah, another one that I always talk about now is having like single focal points is really important. Important. Yeah, it's important.
Okay.
That's the accent today, huh? And so, like, again, just like with the door, people should not have any options that they could do wrong. So if you have one thing that you want them to do on your homepage, but then you have 100 other buttons for like your secondary things, why would you want them to click on your secondary things? Like, only give people one option at a time so they don't get overwhelmed and they do exactly the one thing you're wanting them to do.
Mm-hmm. So keeping the main, I had some good vocabulary for this before. Like, your call to action should be the main goal of the website, and it should be right at the top. So users can get to your website and be like, that's exactly what I'm looking for. I'm going to click that, and then take them to their destination right away.
Avoiding dead ends is another really important one. Important, I'll say it again. Not only should there be something at the bottom of every page, like the navigation again, or like a main call to action button, but like a book, when you get to the bottom of the page, you go to the next page. But with websites, you can't just physically flip to the next one. So if I get to the bottom and I just learned everything about your services, and then like I get down and all I can see is like your privacy policy, I mean, it's obvious what you want me to do next is go to the contact page, but in the moment, I might not be thinking about what I'm supposed to do next. I'll just get to the bottom and be like, that is very interesting plumbing information. and then I'll leave. And it's not that like I chose not to reach out to you. It's just that it wasn't easy enough for me to do without thinking about it.
Yeah, there's a lot of things that people are really used to in website design, and they kind of expect that from a website.
Yeah.
So yeah, like you mentioned, navigation at the top, social links usually in the footer, and if you have anything that's like a subscribe to our newsletter, that's usually in the footer. Yeah, and just making sure that you have like a visual hierarchy to your content, and your typography is, you have a typography hierarchy as well. And if you're unsure of how to do that, again, Google is your friend in these situations.
So for people who don't really know what like title typography hierarchy is, can you explain that a little more?
So,
and if not,
yeah.
I can help too.
So yeah, headings should be, I want to explain this in like non-design terms that I can, like I'm talking to just anybody, because I am. So your heading should be your main focal point. It should be usually the biggest and sometimes the boldest. And then you would have your subheadings, which usually the subheadings are a little bit smaller, and even if you could bring the opacity down, that's great. And then body text is like your paragraphs, and usually it's about like 16 to 20 point font. And yeah, just if it can be, you can bring the opacity down on that too, just so you can have like a little bit of a hierarchy in the way that people are reading your content.
Yeah, and I think you summed it up really well when we were talking about these answers earlier. When you said like, don't tell people how important stuff is, show them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's exactly it.
Yeah, so when I get to your page, I'm going to know what you want me to look at without you having to be like, first look at this, then you need to go here. Mm-hmm. The form will tell me.
Mm-hmm. And if you want to get really creative, it's also helpful to use a different font for headings, and then use one single font for body text. So just keep those two consistent.
Mm-hmm. So then the last question that we have today is basically the same question, but best practices for mobile devices. So first and foremost, making sure that your website that works on desktop also works well on mobile. That should be standard right now, but there's still some situations where it isn't. Mm-hmm. You also, of course, want to keep these things in mind when you're building the desktop website, because like with very basic layouts, it's obvious what to do. If you have an image next to some text, when you bring that down onto mobile, just drop the text below the image. But if you have some like super complex thing, or like a really skinny, long banner on your desktop, when that gets brought down, if all it does is scale, you might not be able to read it because it's going to be like this super thin, your phone is a very different shape.
Yeah, there are chances you might need to redesign components just to fit mobile experience.
Yeah, like if you've got the type of website where you're making like posters or something, it might be beneficial to you to have versions that work really well for the top of desktop to fit that wider screen, and then versions that fit better on mobile.
Yeah. One thing is like users don't like having to scroll horizontally. So things like forms and big old tables, like people don't want to have to go like this. So yeah, try avoid horizontal scroll at any cost. But if there's things like sliders or whatever, those are okay. Also making sure that like users are able to, say you have like an image gallery, making sure that users are able to like click images to enlarge them. I had a lot of points here. A lot in my mind.
Started, so never stop.
Yeah, mobile best practices. Oh yeah, making sure your typography is a good size, readability, like making sure that you have good readability on your site. Again, and then just like keeping the best practices from mobile is that navigation is at the top. You should.
Too many things trying to go at once.
Too many.
It's like when you're all trying to go through the doorway at the same time, you're just like stuck.
You should make a website or a software experience that people can do with one hand. So there's a map online. There's actually a lot of maps online that you can see that show which are like the easiest places to reach on your phone. So usually like the bottom section is like really good, and then the middle section towards the right is like okay, and then the top section is hard. So navigation usually at the top, but everything else like try to keep it more like just use your phone and see how easy it is. And
yeah, and of course these are things that you never really think about because you just like use websites and stuff. But if you went onto like Instagram or something, and instead of like the main body of content being on the bottom half, if it was then on the top, and like all the top navigation is on the bottom, you'd probably find it really annoying, but you might not even understand why right off the bat.
Mm-hmm. Because then people have to go and use their left hand to like click something at the top when they don't really want to do that.
Yeah. Although, yeah, I guess most of those guides probably are specifically for right-handed people. Right?
Yeah, likely. Which
it happens.
But sometimes I use my phone with my left hand. It's just more difficult because then I can't reach everything.
Fair, yeah. Another thing that I thought of, you will get actually reports from Google on your website if you have text that goes off the screen or if you have buttons that are like too small. I think when mobile started happening, I don't know if this still happens on phones, but it used to be that like if you clicked somewhere where buttons were too close together, it would actually like pop up with a zoomed in field so that you could like try again to like make sure you're clicking in the right spot. Like that should never happen. If you're clicking a button, it should be big enough that you can't accidentally click the wrong one.
Mm-hmm. And that's another thing is don't make your users zoom on your website. Like there are tap target sizes that are optimal for mobile devices, like for website and software. It's usually like, I can't even remember the measurement exactly, but people don't want to have to like zoom into their phone to press a button. Like it should be big enough so that they can actually just press it right off the bat.
What is a tap target size?
So a tap target is like on your phone, basically what I just explained. I think it's like, how big is it? Like 24 by 24 maybe? I think that's a good target size. Pixels. Yeah.
Okay, it's just how big something needs to be. Okay.
Yeah.
That's a phrase that I've not heard before.
I'm always coming up with new phrases.
It's fine. It's industry lingo problems. It happens. Oh, I had another good one too.
There are so many.
So many.
Best practices.
And the problem is like as a user, I already mentioned this mostly, but you won't realize how important these things are until you find something that doesn't follow these guides.
Yeah.
So like really try to keep in mind like how it's being used. Like if you have a bunch of buttons next to each other, is it possible for people to accidentally press the wrong one?
Mm-hmm.
And if it is, split them out, make them larger. Instead of having like 4 or 5 buttons in a row, do like 2 or 3 or sometimes even 1 depending on the importance.
This is also more related to software, but there's a rule that's it's like give users control, like complete control over the software. So like you mentioned, like if they press the wrong button, being able to like undo their action. Or like having a pop-up that's like, are you sure? Like, Yeah. So giving them like full control.
I had one last one that popped up. This is, I guess, for desktop and mobile, is that if you ever have links that lead outside of your website, it should open up in a new tab to kind of show that this is a different thing. Because you never want people to click something and then not even remember where or why they're there. Just like everything looks different, everything feels different. Make sure they understand that this is not your page.
Mm-hmm. There's a quote that it's like, good design is obvious, great design is transparent. So this means that great design just fits the user's needs so well that it becomes invisible almost, and it does not attract attention to the design itself because you don't even notice it. You're just using it, you're happy, you're going along your way, you're getting to your goals effectively. So that's always a good quote to keep in mind when designing something, is that great design is unnoticeable.
This might make your point less awesome. I had one more story you just reminded me of. That going back to like the showers and sinks things, I think it was last week. I have like an island in the middle of my kitchen, and I needed to turn the water on from the back of the island. And so like it always like you were just saying, it's like it's second nature for me to use it from the front. Like, you know, I've got the tap on the left, I've got the tap on the right. I know what they do. But when I was on the other side of the island, where my brain should just be like, you know, if left is hot and right is cold, just switch them. I'm just like standing there, and I had to ask my wife which one was hot, because it's like again, going back to like foundational knowledge and stuff, it's not my brain that knows which one does what. It's my hands, like my muscle memory can do it. Even still to this day, when I need to give somebody my like social insurance number, I type it with my fingers because I only learned it as my login at my first job. So my brain has no idea what my social insurance number is.
Like if I was to ask you right now, what's your SIN number? You'd be like, I don't know. You just like know where your fingers go.
Yeah, I just typed it. You couldn't see it because I'm not giving you my social insurance. Don't even try.
Yep.
Okay, so that is all of the questions that we had submitted.
I hope we covered everything.
Yeah, I think so. But I mean, there's, especially in something as like big, wide, and vague as, I don't know why I did that.
What did you say?
Big, wide, and vague. As like user experience and design. There's going to be so much stuff that we didn't even like begin to touch on. Mm-hmm. There's going to be like half of this stuff isn't even going to be important a couple of years from now. Like it's going to be replaced. You know, when like AR websites and VR websites hit the scene, who's going to care about what it looks like on a desktop computer? I mean, I'm guessing the future. I'm sure it's never going to replace it entirely, but you never know. Like, who could have guessed that like we would be carrying around the internet on a device that we had to use?
That's why it's so important to follow best practices, especially for mobile.
Yep.
Because otherwise people aren't going to use it.
Yep, you got to be where the people are. I think Little Mermaid said that. And with that reference, I guess we will tie it up. I'm not sure what I want to do for the live next month. We might do another talk in this vein. We might just do like something completely different. I'll let you know at some point, probably, or I'll forget, and I'll just surprise you with it. So thank you so much for watching. This video will be posted on Facebook and YouTube as well if you wanted to go back and see any of those points. If you wanted to ask us about any of these things or clarifications or even get like an audit of your site or something, feel free to reach out to me. You can message us on Facebook or go right to our website, yaztech.ca.
Yep.
Did we finally buy yaztech.com? I think we did.
Oh.
It took a long time. We had to wait until the person who had it before us stopped buying it.
And trying to sell it to you for $1 million.
Yeah, and then we got it in like an auction. He probably like forgot that he didn't renew it, but then GoDaddy put it up. So we had people like bidding against us. Stupid.
Yeah, very stupid.
So yeah, we will see you in the next one. Have a great weekend, whatever you do. All right, bye-bye.
Bye.
Gotta figure out how to turn it on.